posted on my personal page the other day after coming out of 2 births in 24 hours, one woman pushed for 7 hours and one woman pushed for 17 minutes. All in 24 hours, both primates in their 39th week. And it was just like the perfect kind of combination and comparison between what's possible. And I just posted because, that's what we do. And Michelle Wallace wrote a question, and I thought it would be a great question to follow up and talk about second stage pushing, what's safe, what's not, how do we tell if it's safe or not. So any of you who are joining in the midwifery world, if you have follow-up questions or you want to engage somehow around this, please just tippity type it to me. So Michelle Wallace's question was, I'll start and read you my post. So the first birth warrior worked for hours and hours and then consented to me doing a manual rotation of her OP baby, managed to disengage and get him into the transverse, reverse Walters, and lots of time and more pushes, finally moved and remolded his asynclitic head to be born over an intact perineum right into Papa's hands. 7 hours of pushing. Woo, that's hard. The second birth warrior started with SROM and no labor. She rested and walked, rested and ate, rested and slept, rested and walked again for 36 hours. She was offered standard of care, including prophylactic antibiotics, an exam, cervical ripening, induction, but she declined everything. And we did some body balancing, and she decided she was ready to, just as the first strong contraction started. She moved from sitting on the ball to a dangle squat with the beautiful birth swing. And 17 minutes later, her baby was born. And I just love this comparison, 7 hours to 17 minutes primates. So Michelle Wallace's question on social media was, okay, that does sound like a cesarean birth candidate. How is it okay to push for 7 years, and she corrected it later to hours, and it felt like 7 years, without fetal distress, then adding rotation in between pushes? This is a genuine question. And it's such a loaded question, and there's so many parts to this. So I just thought I'd take this moment, jump in here, do an Ask Augustine. Hey, everyone who's joining. Hi, I see friends I know. I'm so happy to see you. Tell me if you have any follow-up questions around pushing. How long is too long? How do you know if it's safe? Should they have a cesarean? These are lots of questions that are really real. So the medical model really thinks that there are time limits to the end of pushing. And I'm just going to go out there and say pretty boldly, I disagree. I don't think time has anything to do with our uteruses, with labor, delivery, postpartum, with recovery. I don't think time has anything to do with it. In the same way that a 42-year-old can have a very healthy pregnancy, labor, and birth, and a 22-year-old can be like very ill with gestational diabetes or what have you. Age, time, it's really not the measuring metric, the metric that we need to figure out safety. So with pushing, the standard medical model is like usually 2 hours with a multip, maybe 1 hour, and 2 or 3 hours with a primip. But that's so arbitrary. There is a few studies done on fetal distress, but I want to take us deeper, and I want to take us back into a bigger conversation, which is we have the tools to understand how both mom and baby are doing. And with individualized continuity of care, one provider taking care of one mama or one provider team taking care of one birthing person, we can tell how they're doing. It's not a theory. It's not a wonder like it is in the hospital. So we always have to compare our concepts to the hospital's concept. So in the hospital, there's someone laying in a bed with monitors strapped, and then there's a nurse down at the nurse's station who's looking at all of the strips of 2, 3, 4, sometimes 7 moms, depending on how overrun or busy the place is or understaffed they are. And the machine is actually alerting people when they need more attention. That's not what I'm talking about. In that situation, I can see why you have to have arbitrary time cutoffs in order to keep people safe, because you don't have continuity of care. You don't have individualized care. You don't even have the luxury of offering true informed decision making. So in that situation, I think those time limits make sense. But in community-based birth, where we have continuity of care, individualized care, It's a very different story. And we can provide that truly tailored approach. So how do we know the mom's doing okay? Vitals, their affect, their reported sense of wellness. It's very straightforward. Blood pressure, temp, pulse ox. How are you? I'm okay. This hurts, but I'm okay. They're okay. If all their parameters are in range, they're okay. How do we figure out if the baby's okay? Heart tones, fetal heart tones, fetal monitoring. I teach a course on this. If you haven't taken it yet, go check it out. There is a very specific, methodical way to evaluate baby's well-being throughout the whole process. It changes slightly depending on the stage of labor they're in, but you can do it. You can figure out if this baby's okay. And with good close monitoring and a normal pregnancy, time has nothing to do with how well that baby is. It's the resources. And their resources are things that we can't really measure. All that we can measure is their response to their uterine environment. So if the baby's doing great and the mom's doing great, and the midwife has enough people that they're doing great with however long it takes, we can totally go outside the box. We can do things that the hospital can't do. Obviously, this needs to be with very clear, informed decision making. And so this is kind of like the third piece, if you will. And that is that every birthing person needs to know when they fall outside of their community standard of care. And they need to be the ones making the clinical decision, making the critical decision to do something different than is what is common. So when I practice in a very tightly controlled medical world environment, community standards, so like when I'm practicing in the US basically, and the standards are like this 3 hours for primips. When we hit 3 hours, I sit and in between a contraction, I look right at my client and I say, so we've been pushing for 3 hours and you're doing amazing and your baby's doing amazing. And I'm like so seeing progress and I really think you can do this. But I want you to know that this is not standard of care. Standard of care is that at this point you would be wheeled back for a cesarean if you were in the hospital. And I want to give you the option. Would you like to go to the hospital and take a break or get help having this baby? Some people say, yes, I don't want to do this anymore. Take them to the hospital. They will have the birth that they want. They will have made that decision. Some of them, you sit with that and they say, what? Why are you saying the H word to me? I'm staying home. I'm having my baby. You say, that's fantastic. I'm with you all the way. And you document that informed decision making. And that person gets to lead their care with the full spectrum of options. That's true informed decision making. If you stay with them, you have to also be meeting your own needs, which is that there has to actually be progress. You do have to actually believe that this is going to work. 3 hours with no progress, then that would actually be dangerous. But slow progress is okay. And if you discover, like I did in this OP situation, that we had progress until we didn't, and then we figured out why, it's okay to reset the clock as long as everyone is doing okay. And this is kind of the intense and tough conversation. And it needs a conversation about legality. It needs a conversation about your liability. It needs a conversation about informed decision making. Certainly everyone's vitals needs to be normal. But I think it's really okay. So this person's question was specifically, how is it okay to push for 7 hours without fetal distress? Because there wasn't any, right? So it's okay to push for a long time when everyone's okay. If everyone's not okay, that's a very different situation. I would never advocate for stretching the time limit when the vitals are not normal, when the birthing person doesn't want to do it. Like maybe if you've practiced long enough, you've been in a scenario where the husband or the grandmother's like, come on, you can do it. And she's like, I don't want to. Like that's coercion. That can't exist in community-based birth at all. So it's really important that the emotional environment is very copacetic. There's been clear, informed decision making. Everyone understands the options, etc. But it's totally okay to with good informed decision making, with good fetal monitoring, and good consent, it's okay to do things out of the ordinary. Now, the backup or the asterisk conversation is, unless it puts you at risk, my friend midwife, you cannot go further out on a limb with someone than is safe for you, right? So if any of you have taken my courses, you know my spruce tree analogy. If you can picture a really tall spruce tree with all the branches that go straight out. When you start labor, you climb the birth tree with your client, and you climb as close to the trunk as possible. That's what makes birth safe, because that's standard of care. That's the tried and trusted path. Anytime you want to go out on a limb, a couple things have to be present. Number one, the client has to be choosing. They have to say, hey, I want to go out here. Come with me, please. We don't ever take clients out onto a limb ourselves. They lead us, right? The second thing that needs to happen is there needs to be true informed decision making. So even though the client wants to go out on that limb, you, the midwife with the license and the experience, say, hey, out there is kind of scary. These are the things that could happen. There's no parachute. There's no, whatever. There's no escape pod. Like, this is the reality of being out there. This is my experience helping people there. This is the hospital's experience. This is what other families have gone through. Are you sure you want to go out there? And then with all of that informed decision making, they say yes. Then you need to document that informed decision making. And so sometimes it would be just talking it through and recording the conversation. Sometimes it would be a written signing, some pre-written informed decision making document. Sometimes it could be the clients writing in their own handwriting what they want and why it's important to them. And very rarely it could be them saying what they want with witnesses. So this is when we would call 911 in to witness the client declining standard of care. So this is a huge conversation, and it's in all of my classes, so you can take it there. But you don't have to go further out on a limb than the client wants to go. If you don't feel safe about that, right? So the client can go there. You don't have to stop them, but you don't have to go with them. So that's the analogy there. So how is it safe? It's safe because it's safe, right? I think the kind of the unspoken question behind this person's question is, how is that legal? And that depends on where you practice. So there are some actual numbers in state laws about some of the areas where if they're pushing more than 3 hours, they have to go to the hospital. And so you need to follow your laws if you have those. I'm lucky in that I support a practice that doesn't have those. And so the mom definitely wanted to keep going, and Papa was super supportive, and the midwifery team was trading out and slept and rested enough to manage this. And baby and mom were great, never any issues. So we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And that is my genuine answer. So thanks for that. And thanks for this fun Ask Augustine. Before I close up, I'm going to just check the chat, see if we have any questions. If you have questions about prolonged pushing and you want me to answer them in the chat, I'm happy to. And I also kind of had this idea that I might do a sort of short training. I don't even know what I would call it, but it's just like a short conversation about sort of advanced techniques in midwifery, like turning an OP baby, manually rotating, things like that. Gina Kirby asks, can OP babies be left alone, or is it deemed dangerous? Oh, that is a great question. OP babies can certainly be left alone. We don't have to do anything to them. Some pelvises and some mom-baby pairs function best being born direct OP. That is the way that they're going to fit. If there's a lot of space in the back and there's, not much in the front, sometimes that's what happens. A really tight pubic arch, sometimes that results in an OP baby. The part that's not okay is leaving them alone and not actually monitoring them, right? So there's a big difference between sticking your fingers in and doing interventions and just continuing to do basic fetal monitoring. So we must monitor the baby to say that they're okay. If there's not any progress, then you're kind of in that definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing and expecting different results. So it's a subtle thing to figure out whether we're having progress, whether we're moving towards birth or not. Tabby the doula says, but trying to juggle this with our state regulations and possibly retaliation if we decide to transfer. We've had midwives and clients before they got scolded for prodromal labor. Yep. Again, it depends on the environment that you're in. If the community that you're in is incredibly hostile, if you go outside of the standard of care, then that can be really rough. Yeah, thanks, Tabby. I appreciate your feedback. Let's see. Any other questions? So Tabby's wants to have a class on advanced techniques. Cool. Well, this was fun. I was just going to follow up and say if there were any kind of votes for a class, a conversation, a webinar, an IG Live. I don't know what I would do, but some kind of exploration of advanced midwifery techniques. I was signing NARM paperwork when I was at the Skills and Drills in November, and one of the little tabs is dial the phone, right? So what they mean is this motion. But of course, none of the millennials understand that as what's dialing the phone. So I think that particular technique needs to be renamed. But creating a false pelvic floor, manual rotation, ramping, these are all internal manual techniques that help deliver malpositioned babies. And, I was thinking we might make a little course on that if y'all are interested. Well, it's great to see you all. Thanks for jumping in on this impromptu live Ask Augustine. If you want more of these random questions, send us any questions you have. And also check out our YouTube channel. We have a whole playlist on the Ask Augustines. All of your questions delivered right to you. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Thanks. Take care of yourselves. We need you.